So my name is Dimitar. I am one of the owners and the manager of a small software company back in Bulgaria. What we are doing is bespoke software in general. And we are practicing Kanban like we started back in 2009, so to say. And I believe we are continually improving in our practice. So the talk would be about planning projects in Kanban, which is nothing, it's not something, it shouldn't be news to the general community, because David Anderson, I'm not sure, is he in the room? He's not. He talked about it like, first time I heard it, it was 2011. And last time I heard it, it was a recording at Skills Matter in London this year. But the thing that I struggled with was that the concepts that were presented, actually I had no proof, let's put it this way, that actually it's a working concept for myself. Because again, I'm a Kanban practitioner. I'm not a thought leader. The stuff that I usually want to know, I want to know because I want to apply it in my practice. So I wasn't convinced up until this May, this year. So I'll present you the proof how and why we can plan projects using Kanban method. So first of all, what is a project? I will skip the PMI definition of this. I will stick to the Kanban definition. And in Kanban, the project is a batch of work items, each one representing independent customer value. And this batch should be delivered at or before a certain date. So that's our definition of a project. When we plan a project, basically, and simplistically maybe a bit too simple, but we usually as practitioners need to know answers to two questions. First of all is when this batch of work items could be delivered by our organization, and then how much it will cost to the customer. So we'll have to be able to provide a quote. Usually the number of resources and of course the price. And because we will be going to use Little Slow for planning the project, so here is like a reminder what the Little Slow for production systems is. So it says that the average throughput equals the average work in process divided by the average lead time. So I hope everybody knows what throughput and WIP and lead time means, but for just to recap, so throughput, average throughput is the average number of work items that our system delivers for a specific unit of time, let's say a week. WIP is the average WIP is the average amount of work in progress, the number of work items that we have for the same unit of time, again for a week. And then lead time is the time interval that on average, one work item spends in our system as a WIP being processed. So that's the Little Slow. And the good thing about Little Slow is that it applies to any system. And in particular, as we shall see, it applies to systems within systems, which is really useful. Little Slow holds in lots of cases, and for projects especially, it does hold, because these are the two conditions we should have in order to be able to use the Little Slow formula for calculation. So the first condition is that we must have conservation of flow. It means that the average departure rate should be equal to the average input or arrival rate. So the important word here is average. So on average, they should be equal for a particular time interval. Again, it's really important not to forget the time interval. It can be like the other corollary is that no work items should get lost. If they enter our system, they should not get lost. The second condition is that the system must be occasionally empty, which means that the WIP should be 0. In case of projects, that's the natural state of a project, because at the end, we'll have to have nothing to work on, right? So in case of projects, little slow holds, so we are safe here. Little slow, what we can do with little slow is to understand the average lead time or the average amount of time that one work item will be spending in our system. I mean one work item. For projects, as we saw, we would like to know when the batch will exit our system, right? All of the work items, which is something that little slow doesn't provide. So we need a relationship between the average lead time for a work item, because that's what we can get from little slow, and the finite time interval. So it's like we have an average lead time, but we want to know a finite number, finite time period over which the project will be delivered. So this is something we cannot get using little slow, but we can get really easy, like just by having a more detailed perspective on how our systems work. So here is a Kanban system modeled as a queuing system. I'm not sure anyone familiar with queuing theory, at least in general. So queuing theory is very complex part of the probability theory, let's put it this way. But in general, what we are trying to model using the queuing theory is that we represent a system always as a queue and a server in general. So we have a queue and we have a server that processes the items in the queue. That's a queuing system. And here, I try to model a project using this pattern. So we have this project system outside, and the project system, of course, has a project queue. And inside we have the development system, which again has has a queue and a server. So this is a schematic representation, but I have a visualization after that about how to comprehend it much more easier. So capital T stands for the time when all the work that we have in the project queue will be delivered. Lead time, LT, stands for the average time a work item will be spending in the development system. It might look like complicated, but it's just a Kanban board. What we are looking at is just a Kanban board, a plain Kanban board. There will be another visualization after it. So important thing is that how we're measuring lead time. So lead time, we are measuring lead time, like customer lead time is the interval between when we accept the request, the project, the batch of work, till delivery. And lead time for the development organization is from the moment when we commit to do a work item, again to delivery. So like the first two steps are different, but they are connected here, like delivery connects both systems. So here is how we will be visualizing this schema that I presented. So that's a regular Kanban board. Let's say it's only for our project. That's the project backlog, that's the project queue. We have only 10 work items in it. That's the delivery point, right? Deployed will be the delivery point. Over there, input queue will be, actually is, the queue of the development system. So if you check it back, it is the same picture. And let's visualize how actually we do the work. So we have 10 work items, and we start working like in a certain way. And at a point in time, they end up here. So this is our QA, and this column has no WIP limit. It's an infinite queue. It's just the detail to show that we might have infinite queue, and it will not hurt us. And then they will be deployed. So again, we have 10 work items in the project queue. They go through the dev queue and eventually end up into the delivery point, right? The thing that actually is important is that these 10 will be here only if they go through the development system. If they cannot go directly from project backlog to delivery point, like that's logical, right? But the conclusion from this is that the average throughput of the project system equals the average throughput of the development system. Again, because that was what I struggled with. Hopefully I'll help you to understand it faster. So the throughput means, let's say we will plan to do that. We are measuring days. So these 10 work items will be here, like 1 item per day, let's say. So the throughput of the project system, which is this queue and this server, like a black box. The development is just a black box from the project perspective. The throughput is the same as the throughput we get from the black box, right? That's logical. And that's very important conclusion, because if we know that that's true, and in our case it's true, so again, average throughput of the project system equals the average throughput of development system, using some math. Again, a bit of math. So THP is the average throughput of the project system. THT is the average throughput of the development system. And they are equal. And the throughput of the project system, it's really easy to calculate by dividing N, which is the number of work items, by T, which is the time over which we want to deliver these N work items, right? It's not little slow, it's just math. And if we use this, because we want to find T, how much time will take us to deliver these work items, N work items, having our capability, our development system. So using this plain math, we end up with this formula, which is the formula that David Anderson actually presented so many times. But he presented only the end result, this formula. I want to show you that it's true and it's useful. So the formula it's like the formula itself. Again, T stands to, so the time interval that we'll be able to delivering N work items, our batch, is equals N times average lead time of the development system divided by the average WIP of the development system. It's a very simple formula. Using the same formula, we can actually find the average WIP that we need in order to deliver N work items with our development system. Some examples. Calculating project delivery date. So we have a project, major project, with 2,000 user stories, a big project. We have a development system for which we have historical data, and the data says that average lead time of the development system is 0.4 weeks per item. That's what we know. And we want to know how much time it will take this development system to deliver 2,200 user stories for us. So using this formula, and knowing that the average working process is 22 user stories, like in order to deliver, to achieve this average lead time, we know historically that's 22 user stories for the average working process. Using the formula, we end up with that we will be able to deliver these 2,200 user stories in the period of 40 weeks. It's really simple math. That's the original example presented by David Anderson. So he had a real project back in 2007, I believe, in Seattle, with 2,200 user stories. And the thing is that the business wanted delivered in 10 months, and he needed to budget the project. And using this formula, he ended up with that he will need, on average, as a whip, 22 user stories. So that's the real example, which actually started my journey proving that it's correct. The thing is that this first of all, like average whip is like a bit, we should be really careful about calculating average whip, because there is no linear relationship between the average lead time and average whip. So I mean, if we grow the team, the lead time actually will change, right? And it's a bit dangerous, but here I focus on finding, calculating project delivery date. Let's assume that we have an organization and we want to see when we'll be able to deliver. That's the simplest case. So here we have a number which says 40 weeks. But 40 weeks is not enough, because this actually assumes that our data will be, the average lead time will be the same for the whole duration of the project, which is never the case. The time that we have calculated just now is the time only for the second leg of the Z-curve. So what's the Z-curve? So it's a cumulative flow diagram from one project like 2 years back. And we see like how the work flowed back then. And we see that initially the project, the throughput was small, and the team was slow. And at the end again, it was a bit slow. But the second leg of this red curve, actually, the team performed like the best. Like that's the usual speed of the team. More theoretically, every project can be modeled using this Z-curve. So we can divide the project duration in 3 sections. The middle section actually is the one that we can use, I would say, Anderson's formula, the formula for calculating the delivery time. And it's usually, it depends on the context, but usually it is about 60% of the time, and it will deliver about 90% of the work, sometimes less, sometimes more. But that's the productivity period. The beginning, it is approximately up to 20% of the project time and approximately 5% of the work. The end is almost the same. Again, numbers may vary, but the principle is the same everywhere. So using the formula, we can calculate here, which is the major share of the project time, but it's not enough, because we have 2 sections where we don't know how the team will behave. And in order to have like something practical, when we're calculating the project time, we need to account for first the other 2 legs of the Z-curve, and then for dark matter and failure load. Dark matter is all the work that is initially unknown, sometimes unknowable, by the customer, by the team, and also from time to time during the development of the project, one work item may be split into two. Failure load, it's, let's put it simply, defects, but it's not all defects, it's rework, technical debt, everything that we will need to work on, but we don't know initially how big it will be. So in order to make this approach practical, something that we can use, we are introducing a buffer that should take account and protect the delivery date of the project from all uncertainty that I listed. So the buffer, the important thing of the buffer is how we will be using it. So two essential measurements of the project performance are the percentage of the project completed and the amount of project buffer consumed, which again from Excel looks like that. On the x-axis we have the percentage of the project work completed. So this is the percentage of the work items completed. On the y-axis we have percentage of the buffer usage. Buffer is like a overdraft bank account. Like, so you are using it sometimes we are adding it. Depends on what happens. So every point marks a delivery point. So at this point we delivered, let's say, a few items. Here we delivered a few more. We end up with 100% of all the work items. So that's the usage of the buffer. That must protect the delivery date of the project. The good thing about this buffer is that you can compare project performance using this buffer. We can say that our project, let's say, at this point, have completed 44% of the work items, and the buffer usage is only 30%. This is how to calculate the project buffer. So, and again, is the number of work items initially that we'll have to deliver. This is the average throughput, which is the same like the formula which says average WIP, average lead time divided by average WIP. It's 1 divided by the average throughput. It comes from Little's law. So we have some constants here, like this is to account for the failure load. This is to account for the dark matter. So let's say we expect like 10% failure load and 5% dark matter. So we end up with a number that will increase the amount of work items that we'll have to deliver. When we have this, we are multiplying by the percent that we want our buffer to be as length. So this is numbers of work items. When we divide the number by the average throughput, we have time, and we are multiplying here time. So let's say we expect here that with all the failure load and dark matter, our project will be like will be delivered in 10 weeks, but we want 25% more as a buffer. So we multiply by 25% and add this to the original length of the project. And again, so this is how to compute the percentage of the project completed. Again, this is the sum of the work items completed to a certain point I divided by the number of work items. Right? That's the percent of project completed. And that's the buffer consumption, which is actual lead time minus planned lead time divided by the size of the buffer. So let's say we have a 10 days buffer, and we want to know upon delivery how many days we have left in the buffer. Actual lead time is calculated by the current delivery time minus the initial time of the project. 10 days, let's say. We are 10 days in the project. That's actual delivery time. And planned delivery time, that's the delivery time that we calculated for this work item. So we have, like for the 10th work item, we have some we have we have calculated that, let's say, we should be like 11 days into the project. So by this simple calculation, again, we can get this diagram. This is from a real project. What's important here is that the buffer should not be very big. Like the way we do it, we try to be aggressive, and the buffer should be used, like we should be close to 100%, because this will allow us to promise an earlier delivery to the customer. We can always put a buffer like that big and be always safe, but we will be using our competitive advantage, which we have using this technique. So I believe that's what that was all from my side. So if you have questions, hopefully you have, we can take the questions or over lunch or here. I'm ready because it's up to you. Hopefully it's clearer to you why the formula is correct and how we can use it in practice. Yeah. It is applicable to any type of project work. Actually, in PMI, they call it S-curve, which is like in order to track the budget consumption. Like every project is slow in the beginning, right? For different reasons. At the end, it's always slow. So it's like a simplification in order to allow us to visualize how we can manage the project time. It's just for this.
So what would happen if I'm discarding the concept of projects? Would I always be on the second leg, or?
No. If you are not doing projects, and you mean you are working one item at a time, right? And you have SLAs and stuff like that. You don't need the concept of a project. This is applicable when we have to deliver a batch at a certain date. So if we are lucky enough not to be forced to do it, then it's okay. But from our perspective, like my practice shows that lots of time customers want delivery date. A range maybe, but they want a delivery date. They don't. Maybe they will buy the Kanban concept in the future, but at certain point they want just a project to be like a project. So this is applicable especially for major projects, like David's example with 2,200 user stories, and because maybe you haven't seen him talking about, but he actually recruited a new team to do it, to this project, right? So it was so big, he recruited a new team to do it. But it's applicable to every kind of projects, small and big, and because it's math. Hopefully you got the concept how a Kanban board can be visualized as a queuing system. Yes?
My question is, if your average is from the left to the right, that's what you, I mean, basically from until you deliver it.
Yeah. So the average that we calculated using the Anderson's formula is this one, because we assume that the team will be working at their average speed, right, with the average lead time. But in the beginning it will not be this way, right? And this concept is to show how we can do it in practice, because if we go and say, well, we do believe that the team will be that productive for the whole duration of the project, it's okay, but we will be lying ourselves, right? So we know that it will never be the case. So we are looking for opportunities and ways to manage this uncertainty, because we really don't know how big this area will be, how this area will be. What will be the amount of dark matter? If, yeah?
My question is, if it's an average, does it matter? So let's say,
Average of what?
so I'm going to count the throughput. Okay, so in your first half, I will deliver 2 for a week. In the middle, I will deliver 20 a week. At the end, I deliver 1.5 per week. And I add it all up, divided by the time, I have an average for the whole length. Why can I not use that average to do the work? Why do I need to bother about slowing down and speeding up?
Where will this average for the whole project will come from? Every project is unique, right? And we have data only for the development system itself, for the team. We don't have data for the customer, for this particular setup. Again, we can always, if you have an existing project, let's say, you have data for existing, which is finished, delivered, you can find the average throughput, and it will be exactly, it will be a straight line, but it's after the fact. And we are trying to find leading indicators that can allow us before the fact to manage them. This is a leading indicator. And that's, even if you don't buy the concept of the Z-curve, you have to have something to measure the uncertainty associated with the delivery date, because here we are promising the delivery date, right? We are not promising 7 out of 8 times we will be delivering in, let's say, 10 days on only work item. Right? We have a date for a batch, which is a really big uncertainty associated with this. But the thing is that that's the formula. You can use it safely, because I hope I proved it, that it's mathematically correct. How can be applied in practice this buffer usage? It was my suggestion. Maybe you'll be able to find something better, that's something that better suits your environment. Yeah.
So if I have a continuous delivery kind of flow, but I only put things into production every 2 times a year, would the J curve still apply in terms of thinking in terms of batches kind of overall, or would it be different?
Let's give you an example with what we do. So we have clients for years, like 2 years, 3 years, and we're delivering work items by work items, feature by features usually. But from time to time, the same client says, I want a project from you. And I have historical data for the same team, for the same client, and but I have to provide a certain date, like because maybe there's a marketing event or something. I have the data, and I can calculate. That's, it's not in, it doesn't contradict with the flow idea at all. You can have a flow and say, out of 1,000 items in the flow, I select these 100, I'll call them a project, and I want to know when this particular 100 items will be able to be delivered. Right? And you have the flow flowing, because little flow can be applied on every segment of the flow, right? It's one of the features. Hopefully, I was able, it took me a lot of thinking how actually it's really true, because I believe David, but again, sometimes I want to, to know that it's true again. So, Chris, hopefully it answered your questions, yeah. Okay, so thank you again. Thank you.